Empire. Once upon a time, coaches taught plays two-dimensionally.
Launched a product called 3D Playbook that takes your 2D diagrams and draws them and creates them in 3D. So you've now got a 3D image of what that play is, or what a potential play is that doesn't even exist.
That's Bob White, former NFL player turned tech entrepreneur who saw a need to help coaches translate what they wanted to have happen on the field. This is the Future Sport Podcast. I'm Bram Weinstein. Bob White played with the Cowboys and the Patriots back in the late 1980s into the early 90s. Since, he has forged a career in sports tech, focused on helping coaches maximize practice with enhanced technology as the president and chief revenue officer of 8K Solutions. And as you're about to hear, man, have times changed. Our guest this week is Bob White. He's the president and chief revenue officer at 8K Solutions, which works with a number of teams across a variety of professional and collegiate major division sports and related to coaching and player needs. And it's a pleasure to have you, Bob. You've been doing this a long time, so I'm interested to get your perspective of where sports and technology started and where it's going.
Yeah, thanks. So I started at the very infancy of coaching and technology. So, back in the Avid Sports days, we built the first digital editing system that coaches use. So I honestly had the pleasure of probably teaching a large percentage of coaches in the NFL and college football how to actually use a computer back in the early or late 90s, early 2000s, and then get to be part of and watch that evolution to where we are today. And it's fascinating to see kind of that journey with coaches digitizing, video, and then, marrying that with a database, got them to do tasks that took them hours and days down to seconds and minutes. And then it went from that period of time to, wait a minute, so now we've got this done in seconds. What more can we do, right? And then it went from what more can we do to kind of where we are today, where there's almost too much information, too much data, too much, and it's kind of almost circling back to, I see coaches now looking at this going, wait a minute, just because we've got all this information, all this data, we've got to actually kind of pare this back to things that are actionable, usable, right? And it's almost coming a little bit back full circle to where we were back in the, late 90s, where coaches are saying, okay, well, we've got to break these games down. We've only got so much time to break these games down. What's the important things in here? What's not important? And I just spent, an amazing amount of time with coaches that are, now head coaches in the NFL, but at the time we're quality control guys, and sitting there saying, okay, how do we derive this information from these fields? And do we actually need this field? Do we actually need this information? Is it going to be reflective in a report? Is it important to the head coach or the coordinators? And now I kind of actually see that trend happening again, where guys are sitting there going, okay, well, I've got a million different data sources, a million points of information. What is actually important and actionable? What can we push to the side?
So what are you telling coaches when they ask that question, a mountain of data? What is important?
Yeah, so, it's at the end of the day, it's the important things are truly those things that are actionable or reflect success, right? And we as a company, we really tackle very hard problems for an elite group of customers that's actually a small market. So we at AK end up tackling problems that other people look at and go, wait a second, this is too small of a market to actually tackle this problem. And I'll give you a couple of examples, right? So Mastercam, which is one of our flagship products tackle the issue of, wait a second, I've got to shoot and videotape practice from, a million different angles, and I've got to do that outside in bad weather conditions. There's got to be a way than putting a kid up in a scissor lift dangerously. And there was no real elegant, easy solution, and nobody tackling that solution. So we tackled it. We went out and said, wait, we can put this on a trailer with a 55-foot pneumatic mast and a PTZ camera on the end of this. And, this is a completely different way of capturing practice and shooting practice and for the video guys to work. But immediately met with a ton of success. But then the offshoot of that was, wait a minute, this is not only safer, it now makes us more efficient, right? Now that this guy shooting this thing is sitting on the ground, I can actually have him jump off, do something else, shoot ground camera. Like, it has made them more efficient, right? And so, but a lot of those problems are hard challenges, in such a small market. And so what I am telling coaches is kind of like the things, and I had this conversation with, I won't drop names, but an offensive coordinator who's still playing football. And we were talking about, do you remember when we spent, literally a 20-hour day going through takeoff sheets when he was a quality control coach, and sitting there whittling down the number of things we could put on an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper for the play-by-play, because we could not physically fit all the information on there. So, and that's kind of what you guys need to do today, is literally go back to that philosophy of, okay, what's the most important things, and what's the things that are actionable out on the field and actionable for the players and actionable for the bulk of the players on the field, because you cannot cram everything into a player's head without slowing them down, right? There's got to be a point, a line in the sand that says, okay, they don't need to know all of this, right? Coaches need to know some of this, and then some of this information over here that's good to know, interesting information, not actionable, not relevant, push it to the side. And if someday in the future we need that information, that will be great. But right now it's just an interesting data point.
Support for this podcast comes from Goldman Sachs. What do Goldman Sachs experts and leading thinkers have to say about trends shaping markets, industries, and the global economy? Stay informed with the latest insights from Goldman Sachs on the economic and market implications of COVID-19. Available on our podcasts at gs.com/COVID-19 or any of your favorite podcast platforms.
And at this point, you are looking at all actionable on-field things and solutions for that. You're not talking about rest, recovery, biometrics, any of that type of stuff. Are you into that sports tech realm?
Nope. So we're kind of tackling the, how do I do almost the things that have been done for decades that need to still be done, but are almost old school. So I'll give you another example. So we launched a product called 3D Playbook that takes your 2D diagrams and draws and creates them in 3D. So you've now got a 3D image of what that play is, or what a potential play is that doesn't even exist. And what that solution is fixing is, you've got, generations and generations of coaches and players who have been taught with a 2D playbook. So I am looking at circles and squares from a bird's eye on a page, right? So that is the way it's been taught forever. That's the way coaches see plays, right? That is not the way players see plays, right? It's been one of those things that's been, this is the only way to teach this. We're going to draw this up on the whiteboard or the chalkboard back in the day, but it literally requires a player on the field to mentally translate 2D right into what I'm actually seeing field level. And So with the 3D Playbook, we're actually giving them that 2D play in any perspective, but especially the player's perspective. So you see the teams that are using like our walkthrough wall technology, which is, a big, gigantic 40-foot LED or projection screen that gives the players the perspective of video or the 3D Playbook as they would see it on the field. And what we're really doing is bridging that gap between, okay, here's your playbook, here's us sitting in the meeting, and we're going to go over this stuff, and now we're going to go into the walkthrough room, or we're going to show this in the screen in the 3D image, and that now is a more direct translation for a player of this is that play that we're going to run against these guys, but it's now in the perspective that you're going to look at them. You're going to now see these guys in their jerseys, their uniforms, their position labels, exactly how we created. And it also eliminates and this has gone on for 1,000 years too, is you're showing this in whatever is available for video, and you're saying, okay, so this is them lined up in this defense. So what's actually going to happen is we're going to be in this formation. So this guy's going to be over here. He's not going to be over here. And when he does that, this is what you're going to do. So it just adds another layer of translation for the player. Imagine that when we line up this, he's actually going to be over here and he's actually going to do this. The 3D Playbook allows the coaches to create that exact scenario. He is not going to be over there. He is over there, right? And it just takes that, right? It takes that translation piece of, me as a player having to translate what I saw in 2D to what I'm now looking at in 3D. And same thing in the meeting room takes what I saw in film that wasn't exactly how it's going to be and translate that into, a real life image. And it's taking that level of translation and getting them closer to it.
This is AI though, correct? This is not like you're not doing the video and then transferring it in a way that you get to see it in 3D. Is this an AI version of these plays, but just a more translatable way because it's in a 3D form?
Yes, exactly.
Got it.
That's exactly it. Yep, that's exactly it. And then also helping, those teams kind of bridge the gap of keeping, their field time is precious no matter what. In college football, we're limited, with the 20-hour rule. In the NFL, we're limited by CBA how long players can actually be on the field. And going back to the entire biometrics, I think what everybody has learned with the advent of all of those resources is, less is more.
That's right.
Less is more in terms of players being on the field. So it also allows those guys to eliminate that need for kind of the old school, walkthroughs where, okay, let's get, 11 scout team guys out there and we're going to hold up a card and those guys are going to pretend to do this.
Yeah.
And then, okay, we're going to walk through that, right? It bridges that gap so that can now be done in a meeting room or in a walkthrough room. And, we're not on the field.
Are you transferring it to a virtual space? Like, do you see this in virtual reality and that is how it can be implemented as well?
It can be implemented in virtual reality through the goggles. It's probably way more effective, or what we've seen with teams, it's way more effective if they're looking at it on a projector screen or in a walkthrough wall because it's, again, more realistic to how they're going to play, right? The virtual reality and goggle technology is good, but you're not wearing that on the field. We're trying to get them as close to on the field reality as you can. And this has proven to be kind of the most effective thing.
That's really cool. Your background, you were a member of the Cowboys and the Patriots, right? Back in the late 80s into early 90s.
Back in the day.
Yeah, back in the day, pre-New England being the juggernaut. You're playing in New England. Can you tell me, how did you end up transferring into this? How did you go from an athletic career to a technology career?
It was really kind of one of those twist of fate, luck things. Retired from the NFL, or was politely asked to no longer try out, whichever way you want to look at it. And was working, started my own company, and was literally handball partners with a friend of mine. And he was an engineer at the time at Bose, and he said, "Hey, I'm interviewing with this company, and this is right up your alley. They're actually trying to figure out a way to do, video for football digitally and Avid. You should go talk to those guys." And so I went up and interviewed and gave them my thoughts, and that was literally it. It was just almost happenstance with the guy saying you should go. Didn't even know the company, didn't know anything about it, didn't know that people were trying to tackle this problem. And, started end of 97, beginning of 98, and took off from there.
It must be so interesting because you've seen literally the evolution of efficiency in coaching. How, in your view, has that manifested on the field? How's the game different through all of this?
Yeah, I think in general, the players, today's player, across the board, with a few differentials, right? So back when I played, you had, 2 or 3 players that are on the roster that really understood football and really understood situational awareness and situational football and all of those things, and then the rest of the roster was just doing what they were told to do, right? They literally just kind of doing what they were told to do, and did not have a very good understanding of concept, scheme, football, any of it. They're just, whatever the play is, that's my assignment, that's what I'm doing. I think players now are far more attuned, aware, have a far better ability to almost be a coach-like intelligence about the game. I would say you could put, 99% of college and NFL players on a whiteboard and say, draw me up this defense, and they could draw it up. And I would say back in the pre-technology evolution, I would say 2 or 3 of those guys on the roster could do that. So I think the availability and access to information and the fact that these guys have now grown up with this since high school, right? The fact that Huddle's amazing success, in the high school market, that now players have access to their own game film and practice film and playbooks, and these guys at the high school level have almost the same, close to the same tool set that the NFL teams do, right? And those types of things that at a much younger level, players are now, and players in youth football are watching their own games and having the coaches review games with them. That back in the day just did not even exist. So I think just general intelligence by the athletes themselves is clearly evident out on the field, and you still see guys obviously making mistakes, but you also see just some amazingly intelligent plays made by players across the board at all levels. It's
all really interesting and really cool, and I really appreciate your perspective here. Bob White is the President and Chief Revenue Officer of 8K Solutions. Thanks for joining us, Bob.
Thanks, Brian. Appreciate you.
On the next Future Sport podcast, skiing has gone next level with one of the greatest American competitors ever, Bode Miller.
It's this incredible way of accumulating strength and endurance and blood volume and cardiovascular power without damaging your body. And everything I did throughout my training career was super abusive to my body. That was what ended, and it's what ends most athletes' careers, is not so much the competition, but the actual training to get ready for competition. And
the former Olympian joins us to discuss his tech venture, Skio, that will help skiers of all levels access to information on how to train better. That will do it for this episode. As always, the future is now. This is the Future Sport Podcast. I'm Bram Weinstein. The Future Sport Podcast is brought to you by 3 Advance, developers of sports tech apps that are AI-powered and UX-focused. So if you're looking to create some apps for your startup or your sports biz calls for some artificial or business intelligence, you should check out 3 Advance. They're incredible. Go to 3advance.com. That's the number 3advance.com.